I would like to call to order the 13th meeting of the Rhode Island Ethics Commission scheduled for October 29, 2024, 9 a.m. I'd like to note, as soon as we finish swearing in Dr. Bronner, we will have a full complement of members, commissioners. So the first item on the agenda is indeed to administer the oath of office to Dr. Michael Bronner Jr. So if you would please stand. Would you please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I,
Michael Bronner Jr.,
having been duly appointed by His Honor Governor Daniel J. McKee,
having been duly appointed by His Honor Governor Daniel J. McKee,
swear to uphold the duties and responsibilities
swear to uphold the duties and responsibilities
of Commissioner of the Rhode Island Ethics Commission
of Commissioner of the Rhode Island Ethics Commission,
as enumerated in the state constitution,
as enumerated in the state constitution,
the laws and regulations of this state and of this commission,
the laws and regulations of this state and of this commission,
and further to abide
and further to abide
by my own conscience, independence, and integrity in fulfilling these duties.
by my own conscience, independence, and integrity in fulfilling these duties.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations. Well, all right, the second item on today's agenda is a motion to approve the minutes of the open session held on September 24th, 2024. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Celerini, second by Commissioner Rapidu. Chief. Call vote, Commissioner Susie,
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss.
Aye.
Commissioner Browner. Same. Commissioner Celerini,
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson,
Aye.
Commissioner Ritchie,
Aye.
Commissioner Rapidu,
Aye.
Commissioner Harrison,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. The next item on the agenda is the director's report.
Good morning.
morning.
And welcome, Commissioner Brown. So happy to have you. You're probably not used to being so squeezed into the commission table, but it's nice to see. It's been a long time. I'll just start by noting for the audience members that we are live streaming. The link to the live stream agenda is the link to the live stream is printed on our agenda. Our agenda is available on our website. It's also available here, of course. Our meeting materials are also available to view and download on our website. The live stream will cover the entire open session. When we go into executive session, following open session, the live stream will end temporarily until we reconvene in open session. At that time, the live stream will start and the chair will report any votes that were taken in executive session. And we'll adjourn shortly there. So just moving on to the substance of the director's report, first starting with complaints and investigations. We have 8 complaints pending right now before the commission. Few are post probable cause, some are still under investigation. And one of the things I want to inform the commission about is that we've had some informal resolutions in some of the financial disclosure complaints that we filed this year. As the commission knows, and we'll be talking about later when we talk about fine schedules for financial disclosure complaints, the staff has the ability to informally dispose of some financial disclosure complaints that we've initiated. This year, we initiated 4 financial disclosure complaints relative to non-filing the 2023 financial disclosure statements. Of those 4, we administratively dismissed 1. And that's because we found out that the day we filed the complaints, just prior to that, the person had actually filed. So there was a delay in the crossing of the mail. So when we learned that, we administratively dismissed that complaint. Then there were 3 remaining complaints. 2 of those we entered into informal resolutions and settlements pursuant to the fine schedule that the commission has approved. So in those cases, within 10 days of the complaint complaint being filed against these two persons. They filed their financial disclosure statement, their tardy statement. They signed a form saying they consented to entry of a finding of violation, and they tendered $100 civil penalty. And that closed the case out. In those cases, they don't have to appear before the Ethics Commission. The case is just disposed of in that way. The final matter that is still, that was filed, that person did file their statement, but did not consent to a finding of violation or tender $100 civil penalty. And so that matters before you today for a probable cause hearing when we go into executive session. The reason I'm telling you this is part of the fine schedule requires that when we handle these cases informally, we let you know what we did within a reasonable amount. So I just want to keep you up to date on it. If there are no questions about that, I'll move on. Regarding advisory opinions, we have 5 pending right now. 3 of those are on today's agenda. So it's been kind of slow in terms of advisory opinions coming in the last, because it's election season, and what we are anticipating is that after the election, we're going to see a lot of requests for advisory opinions and maybe a lot more complaints. So we'll see. Regarding APRA, or Access to Public Records Act requests, we had 6 requests since the last meeting, and 5 of those we fulfilled within 1 business day of receiving them, as we always try to do, although we're allowed 10 business days plus extensions. The 6th request is still pending, but the statute is told on that. It was a very substantial request seeking about 650 different financial disclosure statements, historical financial disclosure statements that we don't even have in office, that we have to order from our archives. And so we're working with the requester to kind of narrow it down, make sure that they're willing to pay for bringing that back. It'll end up costing about $130 to do.
Is that a private or public request?
It's a private requester. It's from a university. They're doing some historical research on legislative recusals. So it's a valid thing they're looking for. And we're working. Then moving into financial disclosure, just briefly, we're concluding the 2023 financial disclosure filing season, obviously, and we're starting our work on the 2024 filing season, which is a substantial amount of work. What we're in the process of doing now is we're reaching out to every city and town clerk, to fire district administrators, to charter school administrators, to state agencies, sending them lists we filed last year, asking them to update them, add the new people, tell us who was left. And then between now and March of 2025, we'll update our database so that we have new perfect information, or as close to perfect as we can get it before we send out. So there's a lot of work involved in that, and takes several staff people to get that. Regarding just general office administration, I'll just note that our next meeting is November 19th. We only have 1 meeting in November, and we only have 1 meeting in December until the new year. And then speaking of that, the final item is that in your packets is the tentative meeting schedule for 2025. Under the Open Meetings Act, we have to publish a meeting schedule as best we can for each year. It's tentative in that we're allowed to change it. We can add meetings, we can cancel meetings. That's not a problem, but I think all of us appreciate having the full year's schedule so that we can put it on our calendars and kind of think about our time off and time away and other things. So I would ask that if you have a chance that you input the 2025 tentative agenda into your calendar. It may be that we may have to add a meeting here or there if we schedule an adjudication. It could take maybe more than a day, so we might add an extra day to whatever meeting week that is. And then again, as we try to do, if we have a very small agenda planned, we don't want to bring everyone in during the workday for a half an hour meeting. So in those cases, I try to cancel those meetings and consolidate. If any of you have any questions or problems with the 2025 tentative agenda, please let me know, because we're not going to publish it for another month or so. So we have time to move some dates around if necessary. That's all I have.
I would only point out to commissioners that we're the crew of 9 now. We have a much better opportunity to have full quorums, even though some of us have to be missing. So the dates are probably easier to agree with and then work around your own schedule later. Does anybody have any questions of the executive director? Is there a sign-in sheet? The next item on the agenda are advisory opinions. First one on the sign-up sheet, in fact, the only one on the sign-up sheet, is Andrew Kettle.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
The draft for this petitioner is in tab C in your binders. Welcome, Mr. Kettle. Mr. Kettle seeks an advisory opinion regarding whether the Code of Ethics precludes him from accepting the position of Emergency Management Director for the town of Charlestown, given that he is privately employed and intends to remain so as Chief of Charlestown Ambulance Rescue Services, or CARS, which is a private corporation that currently contracts with the town to provide emergency medical services. First, we will look at the petitioner's private duties for CARS, then what his public duties would be as EM director, and how those public duties would involve or impact CARS as his private employer. I will then identify the applicable code provisions and offer an analysis and conclusion. Mr. Kettle oversees emergency medical service operations for CARS and advises the town on matters such as emergency preparedness, air medical resources, and community safety. He works Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m., but is on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He reports directly to the CARS Board of Directors, and he has about 36 subordinates. Mr. Kettle signed the contract between CARS and the town in his capacity as the chief of CARS, and he also participated in that contract's negotiation. The town administrator for Charlestown has offered Mr. Kettle the position of EM director, a position that is mandated by the town's charter. His work hours would be flexible and vary from week to week, but Mr. Kettle is working 8 to 12 hours each week during the evenings and or on weekends. The EM director's duties are identified by the charter in full on in paragraph 2 of page 2 of the draft, but by way of a summary, Mr. Kettle would be tasked with the following: preparing a comprehensive plan for use during an emergency, equipping and maintaining an emergency communications center, assisting the town council president in a declared emergency, acting as a liaison with local public safety agencies, and submitting to the Budget Commission a request for funds to be used in an emergency. Mr. Kettle offers the following information about how a number of his public duties would involve or impact his private employer. First, as to the duty of the EM director to prepare a comprehensive plan for the utilization of and personnel during an emergency, Mr. Kettle states that CARS would be expected to respond to such an emergency, but that he is unsure at this time of how the comprehensive plan would incorporate CARS. With regard to the duty to act as liaison for the town with various public service agencies, CARS would be one such agency. The EM director would be expected to host the chief of CARS at a monthly meeting during the exercise of this particular responsibility. Now, Mr. Kettle offers that in the event that he is able to accept the EM director position, he will either recuse from participating in these monthly meetings in his public capacity, in which case the town administrator would take his place, or recuse from participating in his private capacity, in which case a member of the CARS Board of Directors would take his place. Regarding the EM director's duty to submit to the Town Budget Commission a request for funds to be used in the event of an emergency, the petitioner explains that the funds used to compensate CARS under the contract are indeed a line item in the town's annual budget, which is approved by the taxpayers. Sometimes, however, extraordinary expenses are incurred by CARS in the delivery of services to the town, in which case the CARS Board of Directors, with input from the petitioner in his role as CARS chief, negotiates with the town council and the town administrator about those expenses. Mr. Kettle states that should he be appointed EM director for the town, he would recuse in his private capacity from doing so. Mr. Kettle states that the town of Charlestown is CARS' only client and that he would not be tasked by the town with evaluating CARS' performance under the contract. In the event of an emergency in town, Mr. Kettle would be expected to be present at the emergency site in his private capacity as the chief of CARS, and to be present at the Emergency Operations Center at the town's police station in his public capacity as EM director. Looking now to the Code of Ethics. Under section 3614(5)(a), as further defined by section 7A, a public official may not take action in his official capacity if he has reason to believe or expect that he, any member of his family, his business associate, or a private employer will be directly financially impacted, for better or worse, by his official action. Nor under section 3614(5)(d) shall a public official use his public office or confidential information received through his public office to obtain financial gain for that same group, himself, a member of his family, a business associate, or a private employer. Section 3614(5)(b) of the code provides that a public official shall not accept other employment which will either impair his independence of judgment as to his official duties or require or induce him to disclose confidential information acquired by him during the course and by reason of those official duties. Section 3614(5)(e) prohibits a public official from representing himself or any other person or acting as an expert before a municipal agency by which he is employed. Finally, Regulation 1.2.1 requires a public official to recuse from participation in any matter in which his private employer appears or presents evidence or arguments before his municipal agency. When considering potential conflicts regarding other employment, the Ethics Commission examines several factors. Among them, the nexus between the official's public duties and other employment, whether the employee completes such other work outside his normal work hours without the use of public resources, whether the employee is required to appear before his own agency as part of his other employment, and whether such other work is to be conducted outside of areas over which the person has decision-making jurisdiction. Here, were the petitioner to become the town's EM director, even on a part-time contractual basis, he would be a municipal appointed official, as that term is defined by the Code of Ethics, and thus be subject to its provisions. Because CARS would be expected to respond to an emergency in town, but the petitioner is unsure of how the comprehensive plan for which he would be responsible in his role as EM director would incorporate CARS, it's impossible to determine the extent to which any official activity on the part of the petitioner would directly financially impact his private employer. Although the petitioner states that he would not be tasked with evaluating CARS' performance under the contract, it is difficult to conceive that the EM director would be completely excluded by the town administrator and the town council when making such a determination. That the EM director would be expected to host the chief of CARS at monthly meetings is particularly troubling, given that the petitioner would be expected to run those meetings in his public capacity and attend them in his private capacity. The petitioner offers to recuse from participating in these monthly meetings in his public capacity, in which case the town administrator would take his place. Alternatively, the petitioner offers to recuse from participating in these monthly meetings in his private capacity, in which case a member of the CARS Board of Directors would take his place. Either option does little to convince staff that the petitioner could perform both roles simultaneously without confusing everyone attending these meetings and without an impaired independence of judgment as to the performance of his public duties. Unlike the petitioner in advisory opinion 2001-27 cited in the draft, who sought to engage in private employment outside of the municipality by which he was employed, or the petitioner in advisory opinion 2004-34, whose public and private duties were separate and distinct. Mr. Kettle's situation is such that were he to accept appointment to the EM director position, the nexus between his public duties and those associated with his private employment would overlap to such a degree as to impair his independence of judgment and create a substantial conflict of interest. Additionally, the petitioner could not realistically complete his other employment for cars outside of his working hours for the town, despite their flexibility, given that he is on call 24/7 for cars. Further, in an emergency situation, the petitioner would be expected to be present at the Emergency Operations Center at the town's police station in his public capacity and at the actual site of the emergency in his private capacity. Even if the petitioner were to recuse from performing his private role as chief during an emergency, someone else from cars would be responding to an emergency for which the petitioner in his public role as EM director would be responsible. Mr. Kettle seeks to serve both publicly as the EM director for the town who oversees emergencies and privately as the chief of the contractor that provides medical and rescue services to the town during those emergencies. The petitioner's multiple proposed recusals from performing essential duties in both his public and private positions serve only to highlight the inherent conflicts of interest embedded in serving simultaneously in both capacities. Accordingly, it is the opinion of staff that the Code of Ethics precludes the petitioner's acceptance of the position of EM director for the town of Charleston. I'm happy to answer any questions or to defer to Mr. Kettle as appropriate.
Mr. Kettle, you've heard staff's recommendation. We always would open it up to the requester to ask any questions, make any additional comments.
Sure, I mean, that sounds very clear. I think it's not as clear. My kind of assertion is, you know, if Charleston Ambulance was selling widgets to the town and the EM director was buying widgets, then certainly there's a clear conflict of interest. But we've had a long-standing public-private relationship going back to 1971. Prior to that, there was no emergency medical services in the town of Charlestown. So a group of residents got together, established the nonprofit, and had a volunteer emergency medical system for the town. And we've had that partnership since 1971. It's become more difficult to get volunteers to provide that service. So the organization has grown. They've hired me as their career chief. We have career members. And just last year, this kind of contract was formed. We've received financial support in the form of a grant from municipalities since the 90s. And then this contract, it's listed as a contract. It's an agreement. Really, it was just to solidify that funding and lay out the services provided and what we're receiving from the community, thereby just tightening up that public-private relationship. As far as the responding to emergencies and being the director and the chief, I'll just say that 22 communities in the state have somebody that's a fire, police, EMS chief, and the EMA director. So I think those substantial conflicts, although when you put it on paper, it looks like it's there, it doesn't happen as frequently as it looks. Yeah. And I'll answer any questions. I mean, certainly it looks clear cut, but I don't think it's as clear cut as it looks.
Do you wish to add anything based on Mr. Kettle's comments?
Only that Mr. Kettle and I had a conversation about a number of these things, and I would just reiterate that the difference between cars assisting the town as its EMA director and, let's say, a fire chief or police chief assisting as EMA director is that fire chief and that police chief are municipal employees as well. It's not a private entity, and therein lies the difference.
We did discuss that at length, and not every community has a municipal fire chief. There are similar instances where the fire department or the EMS agencies are nonprofit and working for the municipality.
And of course, it could be that those folks simply didn't come and get opinions.
Agreed.
Members of the commission, I open it up to any questions you may have of either staff council or Mr. Kettle.
Did the town of Charleston provide any information as to any realized difficulty in fulfilling the emergency director's position?
I did not speak with anyone personally from the town. Mr. Kettle did represent that he was the town's choice. I understand also that the charter calls for an assistant EM director. And right now, there is no assistant or deputy EM director. I misspoke. In the absence of a deputy EM director, and there is currently an EM director in town. And in the absence of a deputy, there are 3 assistants that work part-time as needed, correct?
Yes, the town is looking to go in a different direction with their emergency management, and that's why I was approached to take the position.
Commissioner Rabbit?
Mr. Kettle, I guess I have a question about, you're not a taxing authority in any way, shape, or
We are not,
so if you did not have that annual contract or grant from the town, would you have to cease to exist?
we would, and, the reason the kind of contract came about is because it's far less expensive for the municipality to support us than it would be for them to then go out and create their own organization or own department.
I guess I wrestle with this. I'm from the town of Burrell, and we have our own little fire districts that are taxing authorities, but our current EM director is one of the chiefs, but he retired before the position as EM director, and it was kind of the same situation where they were separate entities, so I'm torn for this.
I understand. It's kind of a hypothetical. Sort of, I'll pose this question, that on the ballot to go forward in November is a question: shall the town provide for emergency medical services either through a town department or a third, appropriately listed third servicing, a third party cars? If that is to pass, would that then make us a quasi public agency? And then would that clarify or change any of these opinions?
I think we can only go with what we presently have before us, but we may get back to that as we go through the commissioners. Commissioner Ritchie?
Compensation, tell me about
Which compensation?
it. From both entities.
So I'm compensated from Charlestown Ambulance for my position as chief of the ambulance. And yeah, there was, we didn't discuss what the compensation would be from the municipality, but there was discussion of compensation. And it would be a stipend for those additional duties.
Any other questions?
I guess I want to ask you, and I think you started to go into it, the town is, you said, potentially going in a different direction.
Right.
Saying that on the ballot on November 5, there's a question about whether the town will continue with a private public agreement or make it entirely public.
So the question is, shall the town provide emergency medical services either through a town department or an appropriately licensed third-party service, CARS? CARS is under contract with the municipality until 2027. That question is really to solidify and further intertwine that relationship that's been created.
Either way, nothing's changing until 2027.
Correct.
Any other questions or comments?
Of the gentleman, the staff points out a concern that, as I understand it, that if a catastrophe occurred, it's foreseeable that you, in your role in CARS, may have to be outside of the jurisdiction of the town. Yet there may be duties within the town that the emergency director should be fulfilling.
I don't believe I'd be out of the jurisdiction. If an event were to occur, I'd be in town and have two roles, yes, but I have a staff.
Well,
that's-
if the emergency vehicle is gonna go to Kent Hospital and the other persons are not available, you would have to.
So as the chief of the department, I do occasionally get on the ambulance to take care of patients, but for the most part, I'm an operational and administrative oversight. So I'm generally in town. Of course, there's meetings, like I'm here in Providence today, but, you know, for the most part, I'm in town and attending to administrative and operational issues.
So I want to understand something here. If the staff recommendation is upheld by the commission, is there any disadvantage to the residents of the town of Charlestown?
I don't want to sound conceited, but I think that the town would then maybe have to find a lesser candidate.
So as the town, maybe I mean, this, but was there an advertisement for that position? And you the only one who applied or?
There was not an advertisement. The administrator approached me about taking the position, and that's where we are.
So there was really no desperate situation, no emergency situation in the town, they were concerned about total for the street rate. They weren't concerned about the absence of.
I can't speak for the town on that. They're looking to move in a different direction from their current situation.
Commissioner Ritchie, the position is currently staffed by the town. Mr. Kettle would replace someone.
Other commissioners? I keep coming back to that statement you make about the town is thinking about going in another direction, but they're not going in any other direction until at least 2027.
For emergency management, meaning they want to replace their current emergency management director, because they're not.
They're gonna let someone go back in different directions. That's the polite way of saying it.
Sorry, I was obtuse on that. I always need Commissioner Peterson to tell me what the truth is here.
Just very quickly,
Yeah.
is the current EM director a town employee? Or is it a private individual like yourself who holds the position?
He's a retired police officer that's held the position for about 20 years, and I believe he's a town employee,
Still,
like part-time.
no, but he's retired from the police department. He is no longer on payroll.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Do I hear a motion to approve staff recommendation? To the staff, I'm sorry, to approve the staff draft advisory opinion. Do I hear a motion?
So move.
Commissioner Centerini, do I hear a second?
Second,
Commissioner Peterson, any discussion?
Well, I go back to, I live in a small town. I was born in a small town and I was raised in a small town. Sounds like a country song. And I understand how it's important to fill these positions with qualified individuals from the town. But you're somewhat unique. I go back to when we had the verbal ambulance service and whether or not, how that would have worked. So that's really what I'm wrestling with. I do understand everything that Charleston is going through, but.
It is unique, it is
Yeah.
unique, and that a lot of the nonprofit or voluntary ambulance boards have closed. Because they haven't found solutions like we found in the town to really save the town some money and supporting us versus having to create their own entity.
I don't have any concerns whatsoever about the gentleman's high degree of ethics and his commitment to public service. However, the impediment is the law, as it's presently written. And I just think that we're duty bound to follow the law. This is probably an unfortunate result of the law, but I don't see how we avoid it.
yeah, I'd be more inclined to consider something else if there were a posting, no one had applied, there was a complete lack of
Right.
candidates, no one in the state was qualified, and they were desperate for you to take over, but that has not happened. And it sounds like you've been cherry picked, obviously for good reasons, but I agree with Mr. Tennerini, I don't feel like
And I want to just comment on that because I need you to understand that the opinion relates to only the facts that came before us now. Circumstances could change. Don't hesitate to come back if they do.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments? I'll call the question. Commissioner Susie?
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Browner? Commissioner Centarini?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson?
Aye.
Commissioner Ritchie?
Aye.
Commissioner Rabideau?
Aye.
Commissioner Harrison?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah.
Yes. I take it that Mr. Dantas is not here.
He's not here.
So the next item on the agenda is Gregory Mark Dantas, and this is item A. And as much as Mr. Dantas is also on B, we're hearing item A regarding a hardship exception.
Mr. Dantas, good morning again. Mr. Dantas is unable to attend the meeting today. He asked me to proceed in his absence, and we are aware that if the commissioner has questions for him, he would be present at that time to answer your questions. Mr. Dantas, as the chair pointed out, he has two requests. They're both related to requests for a hardship exception. The first one is relative to his primary residence. Mr. Dantas is a member of the East Greenwich Historic District Commission. He served in that position since his appointment in December of 2023. He resides with his family in a home that he purchased in 2020, and that is located in the East Greenwich Historic District. Mr. Dantas would like to replace the existing garage with a new structure that consists of a 3-car garage with a separate living space above it for his father. He, prior to altering any of the exterior of his historic property, he is required to request a certificate of appropriateness from his own board. He would recuse from the Historic District Commission's discussions and decision-making relative to his application, and he is asking whether or not he qualifies for a hardship exception to appear before his own board relative to that application. Section 5E of the code prohibits a public official from representing himself or authorizing another person to appear on his behalf before his own agency, unless the public official receives a hardship exception through the issuance of an advisory opinion. Section 5E also requires a public official to follow any other requirements that the commission imposes in order to avoid any appearance of impropriety. The prohibitions of Section 5E continue while the public official is in office and for a period of 1 year thereafter. Here, recusal alone is insufficient to avoid any conflicts of interest with the code. The commission reviews questions of hardship on a case-by-case basis, and in the past considered some of the following factors in cases involving real property: whether the subject property involved the official's primary place of business or primary residence, whether the official's interest in the property was pre-existing to his public office or was recently acquired, whether the relief sought involved a new commercial venture or an existing business, and whether the matter involved a significant economic impact. The commission may consider other factors, and none of those factors are single factor determinative. I have listed several past advisory opinions in on page 2 of the draft. In the present matter, I will just summarize. The petitioner seeks to replace the existing garage on his property with a new structure, which will include the 3-car garage and the living space. He purchased the property in 2020, which predates his appointment to the Historic District Commission by more than 4 years. The relief sought involves the petitioner's principal residence and not a new commercial venture. Based upon the petitioner's representations, the prior advisory opinions issued, and the relevant provisions of the Code of Ethics, it is the opinion of the staff that the totality of the circumstances justified granting a hardship exception and allowing him to appear before his own board. Pursuant to section 5E, the petitioner shall prior to or at the time of his appearance before the Historic District Commission inform the other Historic District Commission members of the receipt of these advisory opinions and the fact that he will be required to recuse from any discussions and decision making in accordance therewith. Notice of recusal must be filed with Ethics Commission consistent with provisions of section 6 of the code. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Commission members have any questions? Ms. Papa? Do I hear a motion to approve the staff proposed advisory opinion of Mr. Dantas in item A? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Commissioner Ritchie's motion. Commissioner Susie's second. Commissioner Susie, roll call vote. Commissioner Susie.
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss.
Aye.
Commissioner Browner.
Aye.
Commissioner Centerine.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson.
Aye.
Commissioner Ritchie.
Aye.
Commissioner Rabideau.
Aye.
Commissioner Harrison.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. The chair would only make the comment that I'm wondering whether there's any member of the East Greenwich Historic District Commission who has not come before us.
I was gonna say,
We must, no, he's a new guy on the board. I don't think he'll have any problem explaining to his fellow members why he is doing what he is doing, since we have seen at least 4 in the last 2 years. But it's called the East Greenwich Rule. Thank you. I just have to make a comment now, you know. Okay,
Commissioner Peterson, I believe the person that you are referring to, I think he's no longer on the.
oh,
on
okay.
the Historic
He
District
rolled off.
this
So-
is his replacement.
But he could like, yeah.
The next draft advisory opinions under tab B, it's for the same petitioner. This time, the request pertains to his primary place of business. In his private capacity, he owns and operates Rhode Island Real Estate Services, which is a private real estate brokerage firm that he established in July of 2012. And that specializes in the buying, selling, and leasing of real estate. Mr. Dantas has been in the real estate business as a real estate licensee for the past 27 years. In March of 2023, he purchased a building located in the East Greenwich Historic District that houses the headquarters of his real estate firm. He does not intend to sell that building, and his business also has satellite offices in Jamestown, Narragansett, and North Kingstown. The real estate firm is his primary and only business and his primary source of income. He would like to install solar panels on the building to make it more efficient and to take advantage of the many tax credits incentives associated with the installation of solar panels. The building is located in the historic district, and therefore, once again, he is required to obtain a certificate of appropriateness from his own board. He would again recuse from Historic District Commission's discussions and decision-making relative to this application. He plans to hire a firm called Summit Energy to handle the whole process associated with the installation of the solar panels, including obtaining the certificate of appropriateness. Here, again, his conduct falls squarely within the prohibitions of section 5E of the code. And in determining of granting a hardship, the same factors that the commission reviews that I cited in the prior draft apply here as well. In past advisory opinions, that its commission has applied a hardship exception where the matter involves modification to the official's principal place of business. I have listed several past advisory opinions as examples on page 3 of the draft. I will cite one of them as an example, advisory opinion 2011-33, where the Ethics Commission granted a hardship exception to a former Westerly Planning Board member, and allowing him to seek a permit from his former board to install an additional sign to his ice cream shop. I guess there was a clearing, there was a newly open line of sight to a busy street, and he was hoping to increase the revenue of his business. He was allowed to appear before the commission, before his own former board and seek to install that second additional sign. His ownership of his business, that was his primary business, the ownership predate his service on the planning board. It was not a new commercial venture, but it was an improvement to his existing business. In contrast, the Ethics Commission has previously declined to grant a hardship exception for matters involving new commercial venture. One of the examples listed is Advisory Opinion 2000-41, where an Exeter zoning board member sought to generate additional income by entering in a contract with Sprint Cellular Communication to locate a cellular communications tower on his residential property. And although that involved his personal residence, it was a new commercial venture. He was trying to generate additional income. In that circumstance, the commission declined to grant a hardship exception. In the present matter, the petitioner would like to install solar panels on the building that houses the headquarters of his real estate firm, which is his primary source of income and which he has owned and operated for the last 12 years. The petitioner is, as I said, hoping to install the solar panels to make the building more efficient and to take advantage of the tax credits. He represents that he purchased the building approximately 9 months prior to his appointment, and he does not intend to sell it. The relief sought involves an alteration to petitioner's existing primary business and not a new commercial venture. Based on the petitioner's representations, the relevant provisions of the Code of Ethics and the prior advisory opinions, it is the opinion of the staff that the totality of the circumstances justify granting of a hardship. He would again have to recuse from Historic District Commission discussions and decision-making relative to his application, and he would have to inform either previously or at the time of appearance before the HDC. He has to inform his fellow board members that he is recusing and he has received that advisory opinion. Notice of recusal has to be submitted with the commission pursuant to section 3614(6) of the code. That's any questions you may have.
Any commissioners have any questions? I have one question.
Mhm.
What would that notice of recusal say? Would it say I'm recused because I have a conflict? Or would it say I'm recused because I have a conflict, but I've been permitted to appear pursuant to my advisory?
I would assume it will say that he has a conflict, but he is allowed to appear based on the advisory opinion.
I think I'm gonna ask the executive director the same question on that.
Yeah, so there's no magic formula to that narrative that people put in for the reason for the recusal. My understanding would be that in most cases, you wouldn't necessarily have this, most people don't say, I have a conflict. They don't say that, they use that phraseology, but we would at least expect them to say, I'm recusing because I own the property. So it's my own property that's the subject matter of this agenda item. And we would hope that they would also put in I've been given permission to participate, which is consistent with what they have to tell their own board, right? But I think for our perspective, we were auditing that recusal form. I would feel that it's sufficient if they just listed the reason for the recusal is it's my own.
Yeah, yes, because the typical recusal form means they're not gonna do anything in the matter. Whereas here, the recusal form is, I get to step off, I get to present my matter, so I think we'd want to at least, if we can, tie it to the advisory opinion, but if you monitor them and you audit them, you're comfortable knowing that it's been advisory opinion already, and you see that, I'm fine with that. It's just curious how that would work when you're gonna appear before the board, not just to recuse and be gone.
Yeah, I'm not I'm not necessarily saying that you're auditing all of these recusal forms where a hardship exception is granted. You know, in many cases, we don't necessarily know when they come in, it's administratively filed away. If the commission thinks, just in the same way that the commission has put a condition on these by, in the advisory opinion, requiring the person to advise their board that they've been granted permission to appear. That's an extra condition that the commission added probably in 2010. And prior to that, they didn't used to do that. If the commission thinks that in addition to that, it's important that the person, when they file their recusal form, note that they've been granted a hardship exception to appear before their board, we can start adding that to these types of advisory opinions and just add it on as a condition to avoid an appearance of impropriety. Simple enough for us to start adding that.
I don't have an opinion on that at this point. The other commissioners may. I just was curious about what that form would say in this context. Unless other commissioners have a question. And I guess I'll ask, is there a motion to approve the staff advisory opinion in the matter of Gregory Mark Dantas regarding his hardship exception for work to be done at his business?
So
Is there a second? Moved by Commissioner Rabideau, seconded by Commissioner Browner. Is there any further discussion? Okay, I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Susie?
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss? Aye. Commissioner Browner? Aye. Commissioner Celerini?
All right,
Commissioner Peterson?
Aye.
Commissioner Ritchie?
Aye.
Commissioner Rabideau?
Aye.
Commissioner Harrison?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you, Mr. Dantas.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the discussion and vote regarding adoption of fine schedules and financial disclosure complaints. We've received materials from the executive director, and I think I'd like to have the executive director make whatever presentation he thinks appropriate for this.
Sure. Happy to. So this is an agenda item that has just kind of grown from some discussions that organically came up in front of the commission a few meetings ago, and we've just continued with it, and we can continue with it until we get some kind of consensus on the commission as to how to go forward. As you know, there's a commission regulation 3.30, that directs the Ethics Commission to adopt a fine schedule just for complaints that allege violations of the financial disclosure statute. So then there are two types of financial disclosure complaints, either complaints that allege delinquency, and that means it was either filed at some point beyond the deadline, or it's never been filed. So in either cases, it's a delinquent financial disclosure statement. And then the other type of financial disclosure case alleges a deficiency. So as you know, there are several questions that require answers like, do you own any real estate? Do you have any occupational income? Those types of things. And sometimes people maybe put down NA when they should have listed real estate or should have listed something else. So that's a deficient financial statement. Again, the regulation directs the commission to adopt a fine schedule to kind of simplify these fairly simple cases where a person can just agree, okay, I made a mistake, I'll amend my form and I'll pay X amount as a fine. Over the years, the commission has adopted some fine schedules, but only for delinquent statements. I've researched, I can't find any evidence that you've ever adopted a fine schedule for deficient statements. And I think the reason for that, if I had to guess, is because those are more complicated cases. Delinquent, you're just late and you can fix it by filing it. Deficient statements, there can be a lot of reasons why someone might have left something off. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was an error. Maybe they weren't thinking it through, or maybe they didn't want people to know about it. And so the idea that you would pay the same fine for an intentional omission versus an unintentional, has maybe made it difficult for the commission to come up with that. That's my guess. I don't know the answer. Be that as it may, we currently only have one fine schedule, and it only applies to delinquent statements, that's the one that the commission adopted in 2015. And under that, and that only applies by the terms of the fine schedule itself. It only applies to those financial disclosure complaints that the staff initiates. And those are the complaints we initiate at the end of the filing season to try and get ourselves up to 100%. The remaining stragglers, we file a few complaints. If under that schedule, if we file a complaint against someone, and within 10 days of that complaint being filed, they file the delinquent complaint, they sign a form that says, I consent to a finding of violation, and I agree to pay $100 civil penalty, and then they pay that $100 civil penalty. That's the end of the case. It never has to come before the commission, and it's resolved. It is a finding of violation, and it's a $100 fine. After 10 days, the person can still settle the case, but now the fine has gone up to $500. I assume that's an incentive to get them to do it fast. And if they straggle beyond the 10 days, then they can still file their form, consent to a finding of violation, but it's a $500 penalty. And then finally, the commission granted the executive director the ability to consider the circumstances as to why the person didn't file. And if we deem there to be good cause, we can reduce that civil penalty. And I frequently do in these cases where someone has some reason why they were late or and they can give us some evidence of that. So that's where we are. Some of the commissioners, Commissioner Severini in particular, have correctly noted that the commission appears to be required under that regulation to have a fine schedule, not just for staff initiated complaints, but for all complaints. And maybe fairness dictates that the commission should have the same schedule for everyone. Why should we treat, one group differently depending upon who filed the complaint? And also that the commission should consider also extending it to deficient complaints, not just delinquent complaints. And so based on that, I said that I would work on something as maybe just a discussion, which I have, and that's what I've submitted to you for today's discussion. This is listed on the agenda for discussion and vote, but I'm not really anticipating a vote today. I think today is a discussion. But I'll always put down vote just in case, because you never know. The commission might decide that they want to adopt it. Suddenly you might find the perfect thing and want to go. Nevertheless, what I've presented to you today are two draft proposals. One that applies only to delinquent statements, but it applies to all delinquent statements. We treat them all the same. And then one that applies just to deficient statements, but again, applies to all deficient statements, and we treat them the same. The delinquent statement proposed fine schedule is very simple and I'm kind of happy with it, honestly. It's the commission may wish to change it, may wish to change the dollar amounts or the time schedules, but its simplicity is definitely the way to go. The other one, the deficient financial statement, I'll be honest, I did my best, but it's not as good as the other, and it needs some work. So I'll explain them both a little bit, and then I'll leave it to you to, I think what we could do, if it's the will of the commission, is over the next few meetings, let's just keep this on the agenda. Today, you can give me some guidance as to some edits that you want to these, and I'll work on them and then present it again at the next meeting. We've got time, because these probably wouldn't apply until next year's filing season, and those aren't due until April of 2025, the vast majority of them. So we've got several months to have discussions and look at and do edits. Do you have any questions or comments you want to make now, or would you like me to just kind of go over the first one?
I think we should go, just let you make your presentation.
Okay. So the first fine
If some
schedule.
commissioner disagrees with me, I'm sure they will let me know.
The first fine schedule that I'm proposing here is the one that applies to delinquent financial statements. Again, this would apply to all complaints, no matter who has filed a complaint, whether staff initiated or comes from a third party. And it's proposed, it's proposing to treat them in two different ways depending upon how delinquent the statement actually is. So in part one, we're looking at delinquent statements that get filed within 30 days of whatever the applicable deadline is. For most people, the deadline is the last Friday in April. So we're talking about within 30 days of the last Friday in April. For new appointees, the deadline is within 30 days of your appointment. And for candidates, it's within 30 days of the declaration of candidacy. So there are different applicable deadlines, but for all of them, we're talking about if you make good and file that delinquency, it's late, but if within 30 days you take care of it and file your statement, this schedule proposes that that's the end of it. So you get a 30-day grace period. If you comply within 30 days, the staff will administratively dismiss the complaint. It will never come before the commission. You don't have to admit to a violation of anything. You don't have to pay a penalty. You just have a 30-day window. And that will probably take care of a lot of the gotcha type complaints of people who are eagle-eyeing financial disclosures in a week after the deadline, filing complaints coming into an election season, that type of situation. Part two, it makes things just a slightly more strict. This applies to statements where it's beyond 30 days past the filing deadline. And it could be 31 days, it could be 60 days, it could be a year, it could be 5 years, whatever, as long as it's within the 6-year statute of limitations. Anything that's beyond 30 days, keeping in mind that because our compliance rate is so high now, most of these are, you're going to be hard pressed to find a violation that's over a year old. Delinquency that's that old. They're all going to be less than a year. They're almost always going to relate to the prior year's filing. So here, what the proposal is that if upon the filing of the complaint, the respondent properly files their statement, admits to a violation of the financial disclosure requirement, financial disclosure statute, and pays a civil penalty of $100. So this is very similar to the current schedule that exists today in front of the commission. File your statement, admit to a violation, tender $100. That's the end of it. It never has to come to the commission, but there is a violation. You have admitted to a violation of the financial disclosure mandate and you've paid a $100 civil penalty. And that takes care of the entire population of delinquent financial disclosure complaints. Part three is, once again, if the commission wishes to, give the executive director some discretion to even waive that $100 penalty if it finds the circumstances supported. And maybe the reason is there was an illness or someone moved and never used their full, it would be up to me to decide if there's good cause shown. And again, I frequently do find good cause shown. So I'll just leave it at that. That is the delinquent proposed fine schedule to go forward. We could either have a discussion here or we could move on to divisions.
I'll ask the commissioners, would you prefer to discuss this now on the first one? Or prefer to hear the whole thing and then discuss it after that? Consensus on that? Whole thing, that's great.
So let's move on then to the last page, which is a proposed fine schedule for complaints that allege a deficient financial disclosure statement. So this is where the allegation is they omitted something that the law required them to put down. It could have been some real estate, it could have been a job, trust, income, a debt, out-of-state travel. We've seen these types of complaints over the last few years. These are especially against candidates, right? That's the new opposition research is look up let's scour financial disclosure complaints. Let's look for something missing and let's make sure we file a complaint before that 90-day window before the election where complaints aren't accepted against people who are running for office. Again, this is much more tricky to try and come up with a good one size fits all, but I gave it my best, so I'll just explain to what we have. Roman numeral 1, this section only relates to situations where before the complaint was even filed, the person amended their financial disclosure statement. So imagine that I file my statement in April, and for whatever reason, I leave off the fact that I bought a vacation home last year. Then a few months later, but past the deadline, it occurs to me that I've left off a piece of real estate, and so I amend my statement. And as you know, amending is pretty easy now. You file online, you can just log right back in and file your amendment. The amendment is date stamped, so we know exactly when it took place. And perhaps triggering that, filing that amendment triggered someone who doesn't like me now to note, hey, that should have been on there in the beginning. You know, when he originally filed it, it wasn't on there. That's a violation. I'm going to file a complaint against that person. Currently, we would accept that because it was deficient at the time of file, even though the person subsequently amended. So Roman numeral 1 applies to those situations where the filer amended before the complaint was filed. And I divided it up into 2 different sections. One is if it was amended more than 30 days before the complaint was filed. Section 2 is if it was amended only within 30 days. The reason I did that is because oftentimes it will be maybe a newspaper article that causes the person to amend their form in the first place. A lot of frequent amendments, at least the high profile ones, aren't a case of someone just suddenly remembering that they left something off. It's usually more that Ted Nesi or Tim White or someone called them up and said, what about all this out-of-state travel? Why isn't it on your form? And that causes the person to amend their statement. So the thinking here was that a person who amends it on their own, well in advance of a complaint being filed, before there's any mention of it, is a little more proactive and more deserving of a lesser fine than someone who only amended it because someone brought it to their reporter or an opponent brought it to their attention. It's a little arbitrary, but I mean, that's what for discussion. So for more than 30 days prior to the complaint, this proposal just says that it shall be administratively dismissed. You already amended it. You did it a long time ago. We'll just dismiss the complaint. It's already been fixed. And you don't have to come before the commission. There's no violation. There's no penalty. If you amended it 30 days or less before the filing, so in a close time to the filing of the complaint, this one gives the director the discretion to administratively dismiss it if the circumstances seem to indicate that. But if not, then I would not administratively dismiss it, and instead I would bring it to you. And then you can do what you want with it. You could still dismiss it or not, or you could decide to bring it forward to a probable cause. So they have a right to have it administratively dismissed if they amended it a long time ago. For recent ones, I may still think the circumstances call for it, and I might do that. That I have discretion to, but if I don't, then I leave it to you to decide what to do with it. Part 2 is for those complaints that allege that the deficiency wasn't corrected until after the filing of the complaint. So it stayed off until the complaint triggered the amendment. And here, again, I divided it up into 2 different temporal situations. One is if the person quickly, within 14 days of the complaint being filed, amends to add the missing information. In that case, what I'm proposing is that the executive director may allow may enter into an informal disposition where the person admits that they violated the financial disclosure rule, but there is no fine. That's within 14 days. So if they sign the consent, okay, I made a mistake, I violated the statute, I've amended the form within 14 days, then we'll just dismiss it with the finding of violation, and there will be no fine. If more than 14 days elapse from the filing of the complaint, so they don't immediately amend it, maybe they contest it a little bit, for whatever reason, they don't amend it right away. In that case, again, the executive director would have the discretion to enter into an informal resolution, provided the person amends their statement, signs the consent form, and in this case, pays $100. So, or it could be any amount. $100 is the place. In all of these, the dollar amount that I'm proposing is just a placeholder for the commission to decide. Maybe you want 200, 5,000, zero. And then again, C is just, in this case, to allow the executive director the discretion, if necessary, if the circumstances seem to argue for it, to waive that $100 penalty or to reduce it to $50 or whatever the case may be. I'm not sure it's so necessary where the penalty is so low, where it's only 100. You may or may not want to give me that discretion. We'll say I always appreciate discretion in these cases, but it's really up to you. So that's the proposed schedule for deficient and delinquent, and I'll leave it to you to ask questions, discuss in direction.
I will open it up to the commissioners to ask any questions and make any comments you'd like to make. Commissioner Susie had the.
Yeah, the delinquent schedule looks great to me. Get an A+. So, but we need a revision. I'm kidding, I'm talking like a teacher. When I look at the deficient, what is concerning to me is that I don't know what what you would use as a guideline to decide whether it comes to us or not. So there's room for error there where you say it's okay, and I would look at it after and say, this should have come to us. So can you give any guidelines as to what you think would sway you to not have it come to us?
So, it's a great question. And whenever we're talking about the commission giving discretion to the director, I want you to understand, I get it. I assume you all think I'm a good director and that I have great judgment, but who knows? It might not be as good, or maybe I'll have a bad.
It's not personal at all. It's just like
course.
how you come to that decision.
Of course. So there's no hard feelings about, you deciding whether or not to give me this kind of discretion. What would I use to decide? Honestly, in all these cases, we require someone to come in and sue us. And we ask them why, what happened? And based on their description of what happened and why, if it's a case of, it's just, I'm so, they're taking responsibility. It was just a mistake. It's a crazy time in my life. I've got this going on. I've got that. I've had an illness. These are the things we hear. An illness. I'm going through a divorce and things are crazy. I can't get my mail. Those types of excuses, I usually think, okay, that's the important part is the transparency. Let's fix it and reduce the fine. The same reasons that someone actually came over.
So just to bring the educators, into it, the dog ate my homework isn't going to do it.
No.
What I'm going for.
But kind of the important thing to remember is that the people, when you have 4,500 people who are filing, remember 90% of that population takes it seriously and does it right. They file it on time. They really think it through. That 10% where things get a little funny, but even out of those, 5% of those have a good reason, there's some. And you get into that 5%, which you're talking about 200 people, 200 something people left. And then when you get down to that 1%, then, that's when we're going to the ACI to get these things filed and notarized or going into a hospice care. We do that. We do that. Take trips to managed care facilities and prison and things like that to get things done.
That's what.
I would suggest for consideration that the specific language within, regulation 3.30. A, where, it requires the establishment of a delinquent or deficient, schedule. But it expressly states, unless otherwise determined by the commissioners. I can foresee a situation where, for example, if you have $100 fine, a $200 fine. But, while it may seem within the parameters of the regulation that it should be $100 or $200, the commission should have the flexibility of, looking for a higher penalty. And if there's a hard schedule of 100 or 200, I could see an advocate saying, hey, that's what you limited yourself to. That's what your jurisdiction is by regulation. And you can't consider it. You know, since the commissioner, excuse me, since the executive director has utilized certain examples, I'll utilize the same example. Look at multiple out-of-state travel. Look at undeclared income. Look at undeclared income of a spouse. I could foresee where, or multiple changes to a financial disclosure. I could see where it should be above 200 in my personal opinion. I think there should be an express warning that the commission is not itself bound to 100 and 200 if it so feels it's appropriate.
In matters that come before us, right? But the problem is that they're gonna be addressed administratively.
I'm gonna get, okay, that's one thing. The other thing is with regard to matters that are discussed administratively. The executive director brings them to our attention in a general form. I think that, there should be consideration to a more specific disclosure of the utilization and the reasons for utilization of discretion. And if it involves health, if it involves matters that would be violative or concern to privacy concerns, those matters should be addressed in executive session that we know what the discretion was in the parameters of it. That there should be a formal reporting to the board.
And in a formal report, you're talking about the matters that have actually been addressed administratively, but you're asking the staff and the executive director to give us the reasons why when a penalty is reduced.
Reduced.
That's all he's-
I can see it as a checks and balance. Nothing per se against the integrity of any of the staff, who I believe do an excellent job. But checks and balance, that's what I think our role should be.
So my question is, the report we'll be getting to check and balance would still be matters that have already been resolved. So getting the information would allow us, if I understand right, to tell staff and the executive director, wait a minute. That condition, that fact doesn't do it for us, so in the future. That's where you're looking to.
It's almost like a break before you get into an accident. You know, I mean.
Another.
Yeah, or I think it's also a break before the accident occurs. Because if the executive director knows, or she knows, that they're going to have to disclose the specific reasons, and perhaps the commission may not agree. I mean, that's part of the process, even of financial disclosure. You know you're going to disclose, so you avoid certain situations.
But I'm still trying to get at the idea that the matters
So the executive director and staff already have the ability to say, no, we're not gonna do this administratively. We don't like what happened. We're gonna take this to the commission for their view, right? In any matter, correct?
In currently, for people who do it within 10 days, they have a right to that informal disposition. And on this schedule that I'm proposing for delinquent, the ones that are filed within 30 days, they would just have the right to, for those, they would just have the right. If they fix it, they file it within 30 days, they have a right to have it administratively dismissed. The one that it's more than 30 days after the filing of the complaint, that is a situation where I would have the discretion to either go into the $100 penalty situation in the fine, or bring it to, or say, you know, I want the commission to look at this.
That was my, constructive feedback, was that there should be a clause, I think, in both that allows you to bring it to the commission, utilizing your discretion. You have discretion to reduce, you also have the discretion to bring it to the commission, because I could see, now we're giving everyone a 30-day grace period. I don't want repeat offenders getting by every year, year after year, just sliding through. Someone, you know, is gonna do this 5 years running, and every year they get a notice you're late, and every year they take advantage. I would like to have that person perhaps come before the commission, and so we can talk about their habitual delinquency. So I would give you discretion to do that in all instances. So to Commissioner Federini's point, I think I understand what you're saying, which would be like, you know, in your annual, your report at the beginning. We saw this many people, I administratively reduced 5 because of health, this and the other. And if we didn't like one of those reasons, we could tell you and then course correct. So those are done, they're over. We can't go back in time, but in the future, we can kind of narrow the field. I don't see any harm in that. It'd be nice to know what the field looks like, but it's not gonna be to go back in Monday morning, forward back, the decision has already been made.
I agree. It would be good to
Yeah.
know the matters that have been, unless it's a true administrative burden to the staff, just to give us, I like the idea of a report. And I like the idea that you can separate out the ones that really need to be kept, you know, those privacy matters, so we come to us in executive session to be reported. But I think where we are right now, unless another commissioner disagrees. I'm sorry, Commissioner Ritchie, I apologize. Yeah, put that hand up.
Hold on, look, yeah, the discussion part should remain the same. The only change I would like to see, Commissioner Severino had alluded to today in prior, is you not be bound by the $102 figure. That should be an open figure at your discretion again, but not restricted to either of those amounts.
So there would be no specific fine schedule?
Would think that when you have it at a maximum, that's where the problem comes into play. We discretion remains with the executive director in those circumstances as discussed, as mentioned. But remembering that the executive director can only impose no more than $200, and that may not be sufficient. So without questioning the discretion, but giving him having faith in his discretion when it comes to the fine, let's not limit him $200.
In that case, would it make sense to bring it to the commission?
Well,
If he thought it should be more than the fine, then comes to the commission and we can
well,
elevate it?
yeah, but again, if you, yeah, but now we have the situation where the entire matter comes before us,
Mhm.
not so much on the discretion to determine the violation, but only in the determination on the penalty amount. Fine, but that seems to be a little convoluted.
But a reservation on what you're saying, Hugo, would be, I think to accomplish what you're saying, we have to change 3.30, which would require the public notice and a hearing procedure. So, see, because 3.30 requires us to establish a schedule of fines and whatever, so I'm not sure we can accomplish your concerns within the parameters of establishing a fine.
Well, that's where okay. To change the level of fine at this stage is something that we can do
We can,
and we should do. That's at least don't take the discretion away from the executive director. The only concern I have is that he's bound by that $200 amount. And as Commissioner Peterson said, well, if the executive director says, you know, I have trouble with this, I'm gonna send it to the commission, well, that might not be necessary. He may impose a $500 penalty on that. It never come before the commission. So again, it's either he has a discretion in total or he doesn't, but within that totality, there has to be a carve-out for the amount of the penalty.
Can't we, I'm sorry.
Of course.
Mr. Chairman, can't we just put language in there with a cap that says the executive director may impose a penalty of up to? Satisfies this
Well,
regulation,
do we want to limit it?
but gives him the discretion.
Why don't we just leave it open?
Because I would never give a regulatory agency
No.
an open-ended
I understand.
penalty assessment
But
in
we
my-
have-
in my career.
Again, now we're back to the same situation. If we put a cap on, sufficient, under the circumstances that he had, when the discretion to reach his decision, may not be sufficient for us.
But it has to come, then it can come to
Well,
us.
that's the case then, everything has to come here on that basis. And that becomes,
Only the ones where you want him to have discretion to increase.
when
If it's gonna
do we know
increase,
that? When do we know
When
that?
he brings it to us.
After the fact, after he's made the penalty?
No,
No,
he comes to
just
us,
the finding.
he comes to us saying, I don't feel comfortable deciding what the appropriate sanction is here, and I bring it to you
So-
to determine. My feeling, and I'm speaking as if, my feeling is 200 just doesn't address what was done here. And that's why giving him the discretion to bring things to us that are even under the limit, he can bring to us, or they can bring to us if they determine.
I hear what Commissioner Rapidu said also, yeah, I'm thinking that beyond, so to speak. It's a $500 cap, so we might put a $500 cap on. We can increase that when it comes here.
Right.
Okay. So, again, excuse me. Are we somehow, restricting the executive director? I mean, I asked you that question.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, and I also appreciate your confidence in giving me lots of, you know, discretion. It's wonderful to hear. I will say that might be too much, honestly. I mean, so I'm very comfortable with having settlement discretion up to a small amount without coming before the commission, so that I can treat cases similarly. But on those cases where I think, I don't know if I have a handle on this yet, you know, because remember, we haven't had a full investigation yet, which could be necessary in some cases. I like the idea of when I feel it's appropriate, being able to settle one quickly and just get it off the rails, off the books. In cases where I don't feel so good, I like the idea of being able to bring it to you for an informal resolution and settlement, where you have the authority to either, to take your point, to either informally resolve it up to, let's say, for whatever, amount, with the consent of everyone. So that would be with the consent of everybody involved,
Yeah.
especially the respondent. And if you consent to a $500 penalty, we'll dismiss it right now. Or if you consent to a $600 or $1,000. If they don't, then the case just proceeds. Or maybe you say, you know, we're not comfortable informally resolving it at this time. You brought it to us for an informal disposition. We don't think it's appropriate yet. We would like the staff to conduct a full investigation to get into the details of why this information was omitted, and how many things were omitted. Let's just proceed like a normal case.
I would imagine too, at that point, you wouldn't bring in the respondent, because we don't want to have them sitting here with 9 of us debating what we think they should find before they informally agree to the informal consent. I would imagine we would advise you on what we think it should be, right?
Would come to us with a proposed number,
Like we do now.
subject to our approval,
Okay,
as
like
we
we do
did
now.
last meeting.
And
And
they
they
would,
would,
okay.
they would be.
But they supposed to come in, they go into executive
Okay, I
session.
didn't know what you were thinking. I didn't know if you were thinking of like a different version of what we basically do now.
Right.
Okay, just checking.
Any other comments or questions, Commissioner
Just on construction, I think consideration should be given. And I know it's a word within the regulation to the word solely on delinquent and or deficient. I mean, solely, let's assume someone took a $5,000 gift, didn't report it. And that's the only problem within the within their reporting. Could an attorney come in and argue solely is solely, so it's 5,000, and I should be fined the lesser amount. I think there's.
Courts upstairs.
I mean, no, I think your point is
Just take out the word solely and vote.
is that in the regs here, the proposed.
Yeah, or in
Is it-
the proposed regs where it says solely.
Well, one thing that I could do that might fix it, which I think was Commissioner Peterson's suggestion, was let's just do away with the idea that anyone is ever entitled to an informal resolution. Instead, let's let me decide in a case where, you know, no, you're not entitled to it. If I agree to it, we'll do it. But if it's a case where the omission is big, I'm gonna say, let's bring it to the commission for a proposed informal resolution settlement, and the commission can decide whether they agree with it or don't.
The other alternative is incorporating the language within 3.30 that says the commission can itself deviate.
Right, I think it's important. I think that's an important point that needs to go in every fine schedule, that the commission does not have to adhere to this fine schedule. And I can definitely put some language for your consideration the next time I bring this before you.
Other comments or thoughts at the moment?
The only other thing that stuck out to me is the timing in the deficient. I know you have to find a way to deviate the time difference, but something's bothering me about making it contingent upon someone else filing a complaint. I understand the scenario you laid out, you know, like get called by an investigative reporter and suddenly you're scrambling to fix this error. But also, is there any benefit to having it be contingent on, like it is in a delinquent time to filing? Like you corrected it a year later, or you corrected it 30 days later. I'm just, it's hard to make it contingent upon another actor who may or may not act. I don't know.
The one thing and the one reservation I have is, I remember the chair last week commending the staff, the executive director on the outreach, the educational approach. I can foresee the staff going out and it's past time to file the report. If they file the report, they say, well, you know, if you have a second home, you should report that. Then that could trigger the need to correct a delinquent report. You don't want,
That would be a deficient report, right?
deficient, I'm sorry. You know, there's a lot of reasons why someone may have to correct a delinquent report. It may be as a result of the staff's educational approach.
Oh, no, I agree. I think we should give people the right to fix their, I don't wanna encourage people to come forward and do the gotcha complaints after they've already fixed it. However, if we publish this, those gotcha people are just gonna start filing the complaint like the next day, kind of making a, redundant, not redundant, what's the word? Oh. no. Thank you.
Well, I do think that if we change the way we're handling the deficient complaints to the way that we're discussing now, which is I have discretion to do it a certain way, but if I don't feel comfortable with it, I'm gonna bring it to you for an informal resolution and settlement that you can either approve or not approve and go the other way. I think we can greatly simplify this schedule and get rid, we could have almost all of the, no matter when it was filed or when it was amended, we could have almost all of them follow the exact same course, which is if a complaint is filed that alleges a deficient financial disclosure statement, the executive director could resolve it this way, it doesn't have to. Or if the situation is not one that he feels comfortable doing that, then the parties, upon the consent of all parties, could bring it before the commission for a proposed informal resolution and settlement at any point, right away or later. And if the parties don't want to do that, if the respondent doesn't want to do that, then we'll just proceed like normal. Or if we get before the commission and the commission doesn't like the settlement the same way it currently is, then that's all bets are off. We go back to the investigation at probable cause.
Or if the respondent comes and we increase or change the amount, the respondent can walk away and go forward. Right?
I think Commissioner Peterson's summary of trying to address these gotcha complaints, I think is important, especially since they seem to exasperate during election season. They multiply like rabbits sometimes.
Any other questions or comments? Let me see if I can. It seems to me we're not in a position to vote on anything today, Commissioner Green. So I suggest that we're asking the executive director to come back to us the next meeting, if it can be done in that time frame. It's about a month, as I recall, so probably should. And take what you've heard today and bring it back to us. I don't know how much detail will show up in our minutes about what the discussion was. To the extent there are specific points you're trying to address that have been raised, it would be good to be prepared to highlight those so we know why you're moving in certain directions. But I think that at our next meeting, we'd ask, unless I hear differently from the commissioners, we'd ask that you come back to us with the same agenda item and let us discuss it again, but this time be putting the end vote part perhaps more seriously. Fair enough, everybody? Okay, good.
Great. Thank you so much. Great discussion.
The next item on the agenda is a motion to go into executive session to wit, a motion to approve the minutes of the executive session held on September 24th, 2024, pursuant to our general law section 42-46-5A 2 and 4. In Ray Michael, I'm going to say Doan Jr., complaint number NF 2024-4, pursuant to RI Gen Law section 42-46-5A 2 and 4. And in Ray Scott Millar, complaint number 2024-8, pursuant to our Gen Law section 42-46-5A 2 and 4. And then a motion to return to open session. Do I hear a motion to go into executive session? Commissioner Ritchie's motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Susie. We do a roll call vote on this one. Commissioner Susie?
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss? Aye. Commissioner Browner? Commissioner Semini?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson?
Aye.
Commissioner Ritchie?
Aye.
Commissioner Rabideau?
Aye.
Commissioner Harrison?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So we'll go to executive session. We'll wait for the executive director to let us know that we are